RHIANNON and PRYDERI, from the ancient tales of the Mabinogion, retold by Huw Carr. After the marriage of Pwyll and Rhiannon, the kingdom of Dyfed lived in bliss. There was no want and lack, the harvests were richer than ever before, and no one visited the king and the queen without going away the better for it, either with a costly gift or all their needs and cares addressed. However wise Pwyll had been after his time in the kingdom of Untold, it was doubly so with Rhiannon at his side. Every day was greater than the last, and the people came to know that justice, benevolence, and virtue could be found in their mortal lands beyond the other world. And however much the land grew in abundance as every day passed, it was as nothing to the love that continued to grow between Pwyll and Rhiannon, his goddess and wife. But even with all this joy, there were some who can never be content. For 2 years the people were satisfied, yet when a 3rd year passed, and Rhiannon showed no sign of producing an heir to the kingdom, the nobles of the land came to Pwyll and expressed their concern.
"Lord,"
they said,
"by the gods of our tribe, we have known no greater reign than that of yours and of your wife, the Lady Rhiannon. Yet there is no child to give us confidence that your reign will not fail, and this blessed time come to an end. Is she not able to bring you a child to ease our cares?"
"It is still early, and we are both young," replied Pwyll. "Do not be afraid. Give us another year, and you will see an heir."
"We must,"
cautioned his nobles,
"for without one we cannot permit this union to continue."
"Put your trust in me, as I do in your wisdom, and I will not fail you," Pwyll replied openly. Yet, in his heart, he said, "I will never give Rhiannon up. There is nothing she could do that would make me betray my love for her." As it was, they were treated to long days of matchless weather. The sun was bright and nights clear with bejeweled stars, so there was no shortage of their lovemaking in that time. And so it came to be that before the year was out, Rhiannon began to show signs that she was with child. In the spring of the next year, she gave birth in Arbeth to a handsome boy whose hair was as golden as Rhiannon's. When the night came, it was dark and thick with mist. No star could be seen, and no one went to or fro once the sun had set, for fear they would become lost. It was the night of May Eve, one of the nights of the year that the other world is close to our own mortal lands. The elders of the realm whispered that it was a mixed blessing that the child should be born at such a portentous time. Rhiannon, happy but tired, lay herself down to sleep in her chamber, and her young son was left to the care of 6 nursemaids. Outside, the darkness grew. It crept inside the stronghold of Arbeth like a living thing, swallowing the light. Neglecting their charge, the nursemaids fell into a deep sleep as a thick, dark mist entered the room and wrapped about them. It was shortly before sunrise that one of the nursemaids woke and, fearful that she had fallen asleep, turned to where they had left the boy. Her stomach seemed to turn to ice within her as she found the baby missing. In a panic, she woke the others, who began a frantic search for the child. Though they sought him high and low, they found no sign of him.
"We shall be blamed,"
moaned one of the nursemaids.
"And then we shall be killed." "We shall be let off lightly if they only kill us,"
said another sorrowfully.
"Rhiannon is a wise and just lady,"
said a third.
"There is hope. She will be merciful." "You are a fool to think so,"
said the first.
"There is no hope. Even if she showed us mercy, the whole of the kingdom will be against us. They will demand justice. Think what they will believe we have done. Murdered and destroyed an innocent baby." "But what if it could be proven that it was not us?"
said the eldest among them.
"What do you mean?"
they asked. Thinking quickly, the woman said,
"There is a deerhound in the stables that has newborn pups. If we take one of the pups and destroy it, and then smear its blood on the bedclothes and Rhiannon's hands and face, and then we will say that she attacked us and destroyed her own child."
Despite the vileness of the deed, they could think of no better plan. Although all of them had seen the mercy and justice of Rhiannon and Pwyll in judgment 1,000 times, none of them were brave enough to bet their own lives on it. And so one of them snuck into the stable and stole the poor defenceless pup and brought it back to the bedchamber of Rhiannon with a broken neck. Then they set about rending it apart and carefully smearing the blood about Rhiannon's sleeping form. Rhiannon slept long and deeply after the labor of birthing her boy. When she awoke, she found herself clammy and besmirched by something sticky. Straightway she rose in bed and saw the nursemaids cowering about her. And then she saw the horror that was upon her hands and clothes.
"Where is my son?"
she asked, with a growing fear in her heart. The nursemaids began to tremble even more, before one of them stepped forward to say,
"My lady, we tried so hard to preserve him, but you were too strong for us. We did not know what to do." "What do you mean?"
Rhiannon cried.
"Oh, for your love of me, tell me now where my son is." "Good lady, we can hardly think that you would ask us, when all that is left of him is still upon you."
Rhiannon looked down on the blood upon her hands and her clothes, and that splattered around the bed. Then she looked back to the nursemaids. With all her strength, she said, as calmly as she could,
"I will ask you one more time where my son is. I see you are frightened of something, or perhaps you fear punishment. If you tell me the truth, I will do all that is in my power to protect you. But if you lie, I will not aid you. Your one hope is in being truthful to me. Think on this, and then answer where my son is." "You took him from us,"
said the nursemaid who had concocted the lie.
"We all 6 tried to fight you off, but you had the strength of 10 armed men. We are bruised and battered from the effort of trying to restrain you. And when you took him, you tore him apart and ate him." "What has come upon you, that you should say such a horrible lie?"
Rhiannon asked.
"I care not if you blame me falsely as you do. Only tell me truly, where is my son? What have you done with him?"
Though she spoke fairly to them, reasoned to them, and begged and pleaded with them, they would not turn from their story. When Pwyll came to the chamber to be with his wife and young child, and found the room in ruin, and the nursemaids all hysterical with the story of what Rhiannon had done, all the colour went from his face. He looked upon his wife, and though the women all accused her, he would not believe them. But where was his son? He too searched for the day, but could find neither any sign of him or anything that could disprove the horrible rumour that Rhiannon had done the unthinkable. With no other evidence, he was duty-bound to let the nobles of the court know of the claims of the nursemaids.
Who knew the bliss of the kingdom would be paid for by so high a price?
Said one of the nobles.
Yet we should have expected this. Is the Lady Rhiannon not of the other world? Is she not, therefore, an enchantress and weaver of dark magic? We have never asked of ourselves from whence this magic comes. Now we see it is through the blood of the innocent.
This and many more accusations came from some of them, for there are always those who, when they are met with the unknown, allow their own dark fears to replace their judgment. Heated words were thrown about until the nobles called that Rhiannon should be cast out of the land. At last, Pwyll arose and called the assembly to be quiet. There is nothing that Rhiannon could do that would make me separate from her, especially now, when she has lost so much. I do not, nor will I ever believe that she has done such a vile deed. Yet I cannot prove her innocence either, other than to ask that you trust in the word of a lady that you have seen be just and merciful in these past years. Pwyll was silent for a moment, hoping that someone would now speak on Rhiannon's behalf. To Pwyll's sorrow, no one came forward. At last Pwyll said, "Very well. You believe beyond all the evidence of her character that she has done this terrible thing. Though she and I rule this land, we are as subject to its laws as are the lowest among us. So, if it is true that she has done wrong, let her be punished for the crime." The wisest of the court gathered together and discussed the matter. They could find no fault with the testimony of the 6 nursemaids, nor could they find anything to prove Rhiannon's innocence. So it was decided that for 7 years Rhiannon should sit by the gate of Arbeth while the sun was up and tell her story to everyone who might not know it. They added, too, that she must, after completing the tale, get down onto her hands and knees and offer to carry into the court on her back any guest or stranger who would allow her to do so. When she was strong enough again to begin her punishment, she took her daily place by the gate. It was seldom that anyone would allow her to suffer the punishment of getting on her back, and her being there horse into the court. In the land of Gwentus Coed at that time there lived a brave and noble lord by the name of Rhiannon. In his stables were the finest horses in all of the world, and among them was his handsome and prized mare. Every May Eve she foaled, but even so, that same night a great dark mist would descend on the Cantrev. when it lifted, there would be no trace of the beautiful foal. As the night of May Eve came, Tenon said to his wife,
"Between me and the gods of our tribe, we will be fools if we allow another year to pass without discovering who or what it is that robs us of our coat. I will sit up tonight with my weapons in the stable and guard the mare as she foals."
Tiernan took his sword, his spear, and his long shield, and he sat within touching distance of the mare. Before the night was half past, she foaled, a magnificent sturdy colt, flawless and beautiful. Tiernan put down his weapons for a moment to stroke the little beast, and marvel at the way it stood proud and strong. But the moment he laid down his sword, the great mist that had gathered outside rolled into the stable and turned all within to utter darkness. Tiernan heard a sound of something large and heavy outside, and then the scream of the young colt. He snatched up his blade and sought to find the foal. Instead, to his horror, he found a great, thick arm like a tree trunk, and the colt seized by a mighty clawed hand. Tiernan hacked at the arm until it was severed at the elbow. The hand and forearm fell into the stable, and the foal was released, as a giant scream bellowed outside. With spear and shield in hand, Tiernan raced outside, but could see nothing but for the thick, dark mist. In the darkness nearby, he heard the shambling of a great form, and for a moment he purposed to run after it. But then he remembered the unguarded foal and turned back to the stable. When he entered, he found not only the foal and the mare safe in the room, but a small, golden-headed child wrapped in cloths of the finest silk. In a wonder, he gathered up the child and brought him to his wife, where she lay sleeping. She awoke then, and saw the amazement in his face, and that he carried a burden in his arms.
"Did you save the foal?"
she asked.
"Not only that,"
he said, and told her of what had befallen there with the mist and the strange thing in the darkness. His wife looked at the silk brocade and said,
"He is the child of noble people."
"What should we do?"
asked Tiernan.
"I will take some women into my confidence and ask them to say that I have been with child. In time, we will show him to the world and call him our son."
"A good thing that," said Tiernan. "What shall you call him?" His wife looked at the hair upon the boy's head that was more golden than the corn.
"I will name him for his hair. Guri Goldenhair he shall be called."
So, Guri Goldenhair was brought up in their court as their son. And before a year had passed, he could walk and run better than a 3-year-old child. Before the next year had passed, he was as strong and witty as the best child of 6 years. And by the time he was 4, he was as skilful a rider as a grown man of 20, and arguing with his father why he could not go out with him on their patrols of the land. Because Guri was already a great rider, his father had given him the fine colt who had been rescued on the night they had found him. The two were inseparable. The horse responded to Guri's every command without a word from him, as if the two were of one mind. Tiernan and his wife loved Guri deeply. And though they often wondered as to the strange way he had come to them, they never let that stop them treating him as if he were truly their own. Yet one day the news reached them both of Rhiannon's shame and grief. Rhiannon sent out trusted men to learn more, and they brought to him the news that Rhiannon claimed her innocence. And they learned too that the disappearance of Rhiannon's golden-haired baby was on the very same night that Guri came to them. They knew at once what had to be done.
It is not right that a woman should suffer such grief and disgrace when we hold the source of her innocence from her,
said his wife sadly.
You are right, replied Rhiannon. But in setting the wrong to rights, we will lose our son, who we have not passed a day not cherishing and calling our own. But it is as you say, however much we will hurt, the Lady Rhiannon's hurt and loss is greater, for she has not had the joy of loving him as we have.
They set out for Arbeth with Guri at their side, riding the horse that had been with him since the day of his birth. All the while they rode there, Rhiannon and his wife tried to hide their grief from Guri, but they knew that they would lose him. When they reached the court of Arbeth, they were greeted by the beautiful Rhiannon at the gates, sitting by the mounting block. She stopped them from going further and began to tell her tale.
Chieftain,
she said to Rhiannon,
let me carry you upon my back into the court. This is my punishment that I must endure for killing my own son.
Seeing the noble face of Rhiannon and how she bore the punishment so bravely, Rhiannon was more certain than ever that it was right to free her from her suffering. He came to her side and asked her to cease in her story. Then he signalled for Guri to dismount and join them.
Lady, look upon this boy,
Rhiannon said softly.
Look upon his face and tell me there is a father and son who do not look more alike than he and Pwyll. Look upon his hair and yours, and say there is not two colours more alike. Lady, look upon your son.
Rhiannon cried out and threw her arms about Guri. All there cried and laughed with her, to see the great weight of her sorrows and anxiety lifted from her shoulders.
Oh, the sight of him has washed away the worry,
she said.
For not a day has passed that I haven't worried that he was out there somewhere, and that I could never find him. We had named him Guri Goldenhair,
said Rhiannon's wife.
But it is a mother's right to name her child, and you have named him. In his absence you knew nothing but anxiety, so let that be his name.
And so, in that moment, Guri was given the name of PRYDERI, and he was known so for ever afterwards to the end of his days. And because he would go on to do great deeds, so his name was known long after the day he finally fell. But of that dark day, this story does not tell. Pwyll had been away on a circuit of the land, and he returned with his men to the court. The first thing he saw was that Rhiannon was not at the gate. He feared that some new misfortune had come upon her and him. He ran straight away into the court, and found instead Rhiannon with Rhiannon and many nobles, rejoicing. Then it was that PRYDERI was brought before him. Pwyll looked upon his face and recognized him at once. He lifted up the boy in his embrace and laughed, fit to burst, until tears broke from his eyes at the remembrance of all Rhiannon had suffered, and he beside her.
How can we ever repay you for uniting us with our son?
Pwyll asked Rhiannon and his wife.
Only that he should never forget us.
Rhiannon's wife answered, holding back her tears.
You shall have more than that,
Pwyll said. He stood with Rhiannon for a time and talked to her. When they were agreed, Pwyll and Rhiannon rejoined them.
Rhiannon and I lost a son for a time,
Pwyll said,
but also so have you. You have raised him well, and he has grown knowing only you and loving you. Therefore, he should not have to choose between us. We shall be as one family, our two lands. He will live with us for part of the year, and with you another, and we will always protect your land and support you. And when Pryderi comes of age and the kingdom of Dyfed is his, he will support you and your heirs forever.
A great feast was called that night, and all the nobles of the court were gathered together again, for the first time since the hardship of Rhiannon began. For although many had accused her, few had been able to come again and look in her face as she sat at the front of the court, and they felt in time a great shame that they had been so ready to believe the testimony of the nursemaids against her. As to the nursemaids themselves, Rhiannon had them brought before her. Not all had survived. Some were too torn by the guilt of their deeds, and so had perished, racked with their guilt. Those that did come before her were prepared for death. Rhiannon looked upon them and said,
You have been punished enough. From this day on, each of you will be maintained until the end of your days by my household. For though you were unjust to me, you have not changed me into being equally unjust. I am the same as I was the day you testified falsely against me.
All those assembled were amazed that Rhiannon was so compassionate and forgiving. But there were none that felt it more deeply than the women. And though they never served her directly again, they were faithful to her to the end of their days, treating others from then on with the same kindness and justice that Rhiannon had shown them. From that day on, too, Rhiannon and Pwyll at last lived in happiness, and their days of love and life together were long, but not everlasting. Pryderi grew to be a handsome lad, and there was not a skill that he was considered the most accomplished at. When the day came at last for Pwyll to leave his life, he gave the kingdom to Pryderi and died in happiness, knowing that there was no better man than Pryderi to keep the realm in bliss. Pryderi ruled the 7 cantrefs of Dyfed and increased their prosperity, and he was beloved of all the people in the country far and wide. In time, he conquered the 3 cantrefs of Ystrad Tywi and the 4 of Ceredigion. With this new kingdom in his command, he married the fair Cigfa, daughter of Gwyn the Splendid, son of Gloi, son of the ruler Casna, one of the greatest rulers in the island of the mighty. Here ends the first branch of the Mabinogion. Here are 3 ways where you can help the Black Dog Chronicles to grow. Please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, don't forget to push the notification bell as well, and most importantly, share this with your friends. Share a link on your favorite social media and let your friends know why you think they'd enjoy it too.